Ms. Foster, please stand for sentencing.
Your Honor, I didn't mean to. They're with God now. They're
Ms.
safe.
Foster, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers of 2 counts of first-degree murder.
No, you don't understand. I saved them. I saved my babies from this evil
Ms.
world.
Foster, I will ask you to remain silent while I deliver your sentence.
A mother whose name is Rachel Foster thought the voices in her head were messages from God. Divine instructions to protect her children from a world she believed was irreparably corrupted and dangerous. On a sunny afternoon in March, while her husband was at work and neighbors were tending their gardens, she filled the bathtub in their suburban home and drowned her 2 children, Emma, age 4, and Noah, age 6. When police arrived 90 minutes later, after her husband found the horrific scene and called 911, Rachel was sitting calmly in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, telling officers that her children were safe now with the angels. What followed was a trial that gripped the nation, divided experts on mental illness and criminal responsibility, and ended with a sentencing hearing that would leave no doubt about how the justice system views those who harm the most innocent. Because when Judge Patricia Morrison looked at the evidence, heard the testimony, and considered Rachel Foster's fate, she saw not a mentally ill woman deserving treatment, but a murderer who had taken 2 precious lives and showed no genuine remorse. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. The trial of Rachel Foster had lasted 4 weeks, becoming one of the most closely watched cases in state history. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michael Reeves, had presented overwhelming evidence of premeditation and intent. Text messages Rachel had sent to her sister 3 days before the murders, saying she was preparing for what needs to be done. Internet search history showing she'd researched drowning, how long it takes, whether children suffer. A journal found in her bedroom describing detailed plans to deliver her children to heaven before the world could corrupt them. The defense, led by public defender Catherine Wells, had argued insanity. They presented psychiatric testimony that Rachel suffered from severe postpartum psychosis that had never been properly diagnosed or treated, that she genuinely believed she was saving her children from eternal damnation, that her mental illness made her incapable of understanding the criminality of her actions. They called it a tragic case of a deeply sick woman who needed treatment, not punishment. But the prosecution countered with their own experts who testified that Rachel knew right from wrong, that she'd hidden her intentions from her husband and family, that she'd waited until she was alone to commit the murders, and that she'd taken deliberate steps to ensure she wouldn't be interrupted. These were not the actions of someone completely divorced from reality, they argued. These were the calculated actions of someone who knew what she was doing was wrong and did it anyway. The jury had deliberated for 6 days, an agonizing wait for everyone involved. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous. Guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Not guilty by reason of insanity. Not manslaughter. Murder in the first degree, with malice aforethought and premeditation. Rachel Foster had shown no emotion when the verdict was read. She'd sat at the defense table with the same serene expression she'd worn throughout the trial, occasionally whispering to herself, sometimes smiling slightly as if listening to something only she could hear. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later, giving Judge Morrison time to review pre-sentencing reports, victim impact statements, and psychiatric evaluations. The courtroom on the morning of June 12th was packed beyond capacity, with overflow crowds watching on monitors in adjacent courtrooms. Media crews lined the hallway. Victim advocates sat with Richard Foster, Rachel's husband and the father of the murdered children, a broken man who'd lost everything in one afternoon. Judge Patricia Morrison entered at exactly 10 a.m., the bright morning sunlight streaming through the high windows of the courtroom, creating sharp contrasts of light and shadow. She was known as one of the toughest judges in the state, with a particular firmness in cases involving crimes against children. She'd presided over hundreds of criminal cases in her 20 years on the bench, but this case had affected her in ways few others had. Rachel Foster was led into the courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit, her wrists shackled. She looked thinner than she had during the trial, her hair unwashed, her eyes distant. She'd been held in the psychiatric unit of the county jail since her arrest, on suicide watch for the first 3 months, though she'd never attempted self-harm. According to jail psychiatrists, She remained convinced she'd done the right thing, that her children were safe with Jesus, and that someday everyone would understand. Catherine Wells sat beside her at the defense table, prepared to make one final plea for leniency, knowing it was likely futile but obligated to try. Across the aisle, District Attorney Reeves sat with his team, their expressions grim but determined. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison," the bailiff announced. Everyone stood. Judge Morrison took her seat, arranging the thick file in front of her. She looked at Rachel Foster for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Please be seated," Judge Morrison said. "We're here today for sentencing in the matter of the state versus Rachel Marie Foster. Ms. Foster has been found guilty by a jury of 2 counts of murder in the first degree in the deaths of her children, Emma Rose Foster and Noah James Foster. Richard Foster, sitting in the front row, buried his face in his hands at the mention of his children's names. The woman beside him, his sister, put her arm around his shoulders. "Before I impose sentence," Judge Morrison continued, "I will hear from the victims' family members if they wish to make a statement. Mr. Foster." Richard Foster stood slowly, his legs unsteady. He walked to the podium set up for victim impact statements, gripping its sides to stay upright. For a long moment, he couldn't speak, his face contorted with grief. "Your Honor," he finally managed, his voice breaking, I don't even know what to say. Emma was 4 years old. She loved butterflies and singing. She was starting to read. She would have started kindergarten this fall." He paused, wiping his eyes roughly. Noah was 6. He wanted to be a firefighter. He was protective of his little sister, always making sure she was okay. He was kind and gentle, and he had his whole life ahead of him. His voice grew stronger, anger breaking through the grief. "Rachel took them from me. She took them from their grandparents, their cousins, everyone who loved them. And for what? Because she thought she was saving them? She didn't save them. She murdered them in the most brutal, terrifying way possible." He turned to look at Rachel, who was staring straight ahead, expressionless. "You held them under water while they struggled, while they fought to breathe, while they looked at their own mother, terrified, not understanding why you were hurting them. They trusted you and you killed them." Richard's voice cracked completely. "I can't sleep. I can't eat. I can't close my eyes without seeing their faces, without wondering what their last moments were like, without hearing what Noah's last words might have been, or if Emma called for me, called for Daddy to save her." He looked back at Judge Morrison. "Your Honor, I don't care if she's mentally ill. I don't care if she hears voices or thinks God told her to do it. She killed my babies. She took everything from me. And I'm begging you, please don't let her ever walk free. Please make sure she spends every day for the rest of her life knowing what she did." He walked back to his seat, collapsing into the chair, his sister holding him as he sobbed. Judge Morrison waited a moment before speaking. "Thank you, Mr. Foster. Are there any other impact statements?" Emma and Noah's maternal grandmother stood, an elderly woman with white hair and a face ravaged by grief. "Your Honor, I'm Susan Palmer, Rachel's mother. Those were my grandchildren. I held them when they were born. I watched them grow. And my daughter took them from us." Her voice shook. "I want to say she's sick, that this isn't who she really is. But I don't know anymore. I don't know if mental illness can excuse what she did. I don't know if anything can. All I know is that 2 beautiful children are dead, and their mother is the reason why." Should mental illness be considered a mitigating factor in cases where parents kill their children, or should such crimes carry mandatory life sentences regardless of the defendant's mental state? Comment your thoughts below. This wasn't just about justice for 2 murdered children. This was about whether society should show mercy to those whose minds may have failed them, or whether some acts are unforgivable regardless of mental state. After the grandmother sat down, Judge Morrison turned to the defense. "Ms. Wells, does your client wish to make a statement?" Catherine Wells stood. "Your Honor, my client does wish to address the court, though I've advised her that anything she says could impact your sentencing decision. However, she insists." Judge Morrison nodded. "Ms. Foster, you may speak." Rachel Foster stood, her movements slow, almost dreamlike. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear, carrying across the silent courtroom. "I want everyone to understand," she began, and there was an eerie calmness to her tone. "I didn't murder my children. I saved them. This world is evil, full of sin and suffering. Every day, children are hurt, corrupted, destroyed. I couldn't let that happen to Emma and Noah." Richard Foster made a sound like a wounded animal. Rachel continued, seemingly oblivious. "God spoke to me. He told me that if I acted quickly, if I was brave enough to do what needed to be done, I could deliver them to heaven while they were still pure, still innocent. They're with Jesus now. They're safe. They're happy. They don't have to experience pain or fear or disappointment." Judge Morrison's expression had hardened, but Rachel kept talking. "I loved my children more than anything in this world. That's why I did it, because I love them too much to let them suffer. One day everyone will understand. When they see Emma and Noah in heaven, perfect and eternal, they'll know I was right." She looked directly at her husband. "Richard, I'm sorry you can't see it yet, but someday you will. Someday you'll thank me for protecting them." Richard lunged from his seat, held back by his sister and a bailiff. "You're insane," he screamed. "You murdered them. They were terrified. You held them under water while they fought for their lives." "Order." Judge Morrison's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Foster, please sit down. I understand your pain, but I need order in this court." Richard was led back to his seat, shaking with rage and grief. Rachel stood placidly, apparently unmoved by his outburst. "Ms. Foster, is there anything else you'd like to say?" Judge Morrison asked, her voice cold. "Just that I'm not sorry," Rachel said simply. "I did what a mother should do. I protected my children from this cruel world. And I'd do it again if I had to." The courtroom erupted in gasps and angry murmurs. Judge Morrison gavelled for silence. "Ms. Foster, you may be seated," Judge Morrison said. When Rachel sat, the judge continued. "I've presided over many difficult cases in my 20 years on the bench. I've seen terrible crimes, heard horrific testimony, witnessed profound human suffering. But this case stands apart." She opened the file before her. "I've read the psychiatric reports. I've reviewed the testimony from your trial. I've considered the arguments about your mental state, about postpartum psychosis, about whether you were legally insane at the time of these murders." Judge Morrison looked directly at Rachel. "The jury found that you were not insane. They found that you knew what you were doing was wrong, that you understood the nature of your actions, and that you chose to commit these murders anyway. I agree with their verdict." She pulled out photographs from the file, crime scene photos that had been shown during the trial. "These pictures show your children's bodies, recovered from a bathtub in your home. Emma was 4 years old, weighed 38 pounds, stood 3 feet 4 inches tall. Noah was 6 years old, weighed 52 pounds, stood 4 feet 1 inch tall. Small children, helpless children, children who depended on you for everything." Judge Morrison's voice grew harder. "The medical examiner testified that drowning is one of the most terrifying ways to die. Your children would have struggled. They would have fought. They would have been confused and scared as their own mother held them underwater. Noah had defensive wounds on his arms, showing he tried to resist. Emma had bruises on her shoulders where you held her down." Rachel's expression remained serene, apparently unmoved by the description of her children's deaths. "You've just stood before this court and said you're not sorry," Judge Morrison continued. "You've said you'd do it again. You've characterized the brutal murder of 2 innocent children as an act of love. That tells me everything I need to know about your danger to society and your lack of remorse." She closed the file with finality. "Ms. Foster, please stand for sentencing." Rachel stood, Catherine Wells beside her. The public defender looked defeated, knowing what was coming. "Rachel Marie Foster, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers of 2 counts of murder in the 1st degree," Judge Morrison said, her voice firm and clear. "These crimes represent the ultimate betrayal of the sacred trust between parent and child. You were given the gift of 2 beautiful children, and you took their lives in the most brutal manner imaginable. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. You've shown no genuine remorse. You've expressed no understanding of the magnitude of what you've done. You've demonstrated that you remain a danger to anyone who might be placed in your care. Therefore, this court sees no basis for mercy. Richard Foster leaned forward, listening intently, hoping for justice for his children. On count 1, the murder of Emma Rose Foster, I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole, Judge Morrison announced. On count 2, the murder of Noah James Foster, I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. These sentences will run consecutively. Rachel's calm expression finally cracked. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened slightly. But Your Honor, I saved them. I was protecting them. God told me. God did not tell you to murder your children, Miss Foster. Judge Morrison interrupted, her voice sharp. Whatever voices you heard, whatever delusions you experienced, they do not excuse what you did. 2 children are dead because of your actions. 2 children who should be starting school, playing with friends, growing up. You took all of that from them, and you took it from everyone who loved them. Rachel's legs buckled. She grabbed the table to steady herself, her breathing becoming rapid. No, this isn't right. They're safe now. They're with Jesus. I saved them. Remove the defendant, Judge Morrison ordered. The bailiffs moved toward Rachel, who was now crying, her composure completely shattered. You don't understand, Rachel screamed as they took her arms. I did it out of love. I protected them. They would have suffered in this world. I gave them eternal life. Miss Foster, you gave them death, Judge Morrison said coldly. You murdered them, and now you will spend the rest of your life in prison, thinking about what you've done. As the bailiffs led Rachel from the courtroom, she was sobbing and screaming. Emma, Noah, Mommy saved you. Mommy loves you. Tell them, angels. Tell them I saved my babies. Her cries echoed down the hallway as she was taken away. The courtroom remained silent, everyone processing what they just witnessed. Judge Morrison looked at Richard Foster. Mr. Foster, I cannot give you back what you've lost. No sentence can do that. But I can ensure that the person responsible for taking your children will never harm anyone else. I can give you the knowledge that she will spend every remaining day of her life behind bars, unable to hurt any other children. Richard nodded, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for giving Emma and Noah justice. Judge Morrison's own eyes were wet as she concluded the hearing. This court stands adjourned. The aftermath of the sentencing was immediate and intense. Outside the courthouse, victim advocates and family members gathered for a press conference. Richard Foster, flanked by his sister and his attorney, made a brief statement. Today, justice was served for my children, he said, his voice hoarse from crying. Emma and Noah will never come back. I'll never hear their laughter again, never watch them grow up, never walk them down the aisle or meet their children. Rachel took all of that from them and from me. He paused, composing himself. The defense wanted us to feel sorry for her because she's mentally ill. But I can't find that sympathy. She killed my babies. She held them underwater while they struggled to breathe. And when given the chance to show remorse today, she said she'd do it again. That's not mental illness speaking. That's evil. The case sparked renewed debate about the insanity defense, about how the justice system handles parents who kill their children, about whether mental illness should ever be considered a mitigating factor in such crimes. Mental health advocates argued that Rachel Foster was clearly suffering from severe psychiatric illness and needed treatment, not punishment. Victim rights groups countered that some crimes are so heinous that mental illness cannot excuse them, that society must protect innocent victims even when that means punishing the mentally ill. Rachel Foster was transferred to a maximum security women's prison, where she was placed in the psychiatric unit. Reports from prison staff indicated she remained delusional, still believing she'd saved her children, still claiming to hear their voices thanking her. She refused psychiatric medication, insisting there was nothing wrong with her mind, that everyone else was confused and she was the only one who understood the truth. She filed multiple appeals, all focused on her mental state at the time of the crimes and at sentencing. Every appeal was denied. The courts found that the jury had properly considered the insanity defense and rejected it based on substantial evidence. Rachel Foster would spend the rest of her life in prison. Richard Foster struggled to rebuild his life after losing his children and his wife. He attended grief counseling, connected with support groups for parents who'd lost children to violence, and eventually became an advocate for better mental health screening for new mothers. He spoke at conferences and legislative hearings about postpartum mental health, arguing that while Rachel's crimes were unforgivable, perhaps better psychiatric care could prevent future tragedies. Emma and Noah's memorial services had been held before the trial, attended by hundreds of people from their community. Their graves, side by side in a peaceful cemetery, became a place where Richard visited every week, bringing flowers and telling his children about his day, maintaining the connection that Rachel had violently severed. The photographs of Emma and Noah, smiling children with bright futures ahead of them, became symbols in the debate about mental illness and criminal responsibility. Their names were invoked by both sides, those arguing for better mental health care and those arguing for tougher sentences for parents who harm their children. Years after the sentencing, Judge Morrison reflected on the case in an interview. "People asked me if I ever regretted showing no mercy to Rachel Foster," she said. "My answer is always the same. Mercy for whom? For a woman who murdered her children and said she'd do it again? Or for the memory of two innocent children who deserved to live, who deserved to grow up, who deserved a mother who would protect them instead of killing them?" She continued, "Yes, Rachel Foster was mentally ill. But mental illness doesn't erase criminal responsibility, especially when the defendant shows awareness of wrongdoing, takes steps to conceal their actions, and expresses no genuine remorse." The jury found her guilty of murder. The evidence supported that verdict, and the law required appropriate punishment. The lesson from the case was painful and complex. Mental illness is real and devastating. It can warp perception and judgment in profound ways. But it cannot always excuse criminal behavior, especially when that behavior results in the death of innocent victims. Society must protect the vulnerable, and sometimes that means holding mentally ill offenders accountable for their actions. Rachel Foster had claimed she saved her children. Judge Morrison had made clear that what Rachel did was murder, pure and simple. And the justice system, presented with overwhelming evidence and a defendant who showed no remorse, had responded with the harshest sentence available. Emma and Noah Foster had been 4 and 6 years old when their mother drowned them. They would forever remain that age, frozen in time, remembered by a father who would grieve them for the rest of his life and by a community that had been horrified by their deaths. If you believe that some crimes are unforgivable regardless of mental state, and that life sentences without parole are appropriate for parents who murder their children, subscribe and turn on notifications, because tomorrow we have another story that explores the difficult intersection of mental illness, criminal responsibility, and justice for the most innocent victims.